Later this year, Paramount Pictures will release the third, potentially final entry in the Sonic the Hedgehog film franchise, Sonic the Hedgehog 3. While I was pleasantly surprised by the first two films in the series, if you told me that I'd be Avengers Endgame levels of excited for the third film following the release of its first trailer, I'd have called you a damn liar, but here we are. Not only will the film see the return of Jean-Ralphio Saperstein himself, Ben Schwartz as Sonic the Hedgehog, and the semi-retired Jim Carrey as his nemesis Dr. Robotnik, but it will also see the debut of fan-favorite Sonic anti-hero Shadow the Hedgehog, voiced by none other than the great Keanu Reeves. If the trailer is any indication, the latest film will feature the same mix of goofy comedy the first two films traded in.
I need room. But, sir, I don't have the proper materials. Found some.
The same sweet themes surrounding found family.
You didn't change who you are in here.
Yeah, in my lungs.
And if there's any justice in this world, an extended gun fu sequence featuring Shadow to fit alongside the film's darker tone. I mean, you got John Wick voicing the little guy, and we mustn't forget that one weird video game where Shadow packed heat. Man, that's almost as weird as that one time Sonic got pregnant. Believe it or not, that's the least disturbing image I could find while Googling that particular subject. As I watched the trailer, my 36-year-old eyes literally stinging at the dramatic rendition of the Green Hill Zone theme, I'm not proud, I couldn't help but wonder, how did we get here? Until very recently, it was a set law of the universe that all video game adaptations had to be bad. A trend that began right at the start with the first ever video game to film adaptation, 1993's Super Mario Bros. Helmed by two music video directors, Annabelle Jankel and Rocky Morton, the film took the colorful, charming world of Shigeru Miyamoto's iconic platformer and asked the question, wouldn't this be better as a cross between Mad Max and the director's own television creation, Max Headroom, an obscure television movie that became a cult television show that only ran for 2 seasons? The answer to that question was an emphatic no, because the resulting film was a bonkers box office bomb that disappointed fans of the video game as well as the parent company behind it. Nintendo wouldn't go on to license any of their own properties to film studios for the next 30 years. Rather than learning from the mistakes of that pioneering effort, nearly every subsequent video game adaptation would follow its template, whether it be 1994's Double Dragon, which took the straightforward beat-em-up video game about two martial artist brothers rescuing a damsel in distress and, like Mario, set the proceedings in a futuristic dystopia. The same year's Street Fighter, which took the bare-bones plot and colorful characters of the fighting game and fit them into a boilerplate Jean-Claude Van Damme movie that's only notable both for how terrible it is and because it features one of the final performances from the late great Raul Julia.
Game over!
Intruder destroyed.
Or the following year's Mortal Kombat, which... actually, that one's pretty faithful to the video game, but considering that, at the time, the game featured cheesy full-motion video sprites and bonkers lore reminiscent of B-grade kung fu flicks, the results weren't great. Despite those not-so-great creative and critical results, Mortal Kombat was a smashing financial success, one that taught studios everywhere that there was money to be had with video game adaptations, no matter how shoddily crafted. Mortal Kombat director Paul W.S. Anderson, a man who should never be confused with the far superior prestige filmmaker Paul Thomas Anderson, would return to the video game movie sweatshop with his series of Resident Evil flicks, a franchise based on the survival horror video games that ran from 2002 through 2016, and saw the director crank out no less than 6 Sci-Fi Channel quality films, all of which featured his wife Mila Jovovich Matrix-kicking infected dogs and killing zombies. Independent filmmaker Uwe Boll would follow in Anderson's footsteps by buying up cheap video game licenses and releasing horrendous, low-budget film adaptations for a quick buck. Between his first video game adaptation, 2003's House of the Dead, to his last, 2014's In the Name of the King: The Last Mission, Boll released no less than 8 shitty video game to film releases, many of which inexplicably featured some high-profile names. There was the Christian Slater Tara Reid joint Alone in the Dark, Blood Rain, which starred... wait, that can't be right. Ben Kingsley and Billy Zane!
Listen to your friend Billy Zane. He's a cool dude.
And the original In the Name of the King, a dungeon siege tale which starred Jason Statham, Ray Liotta, and Burt Reynolds. There's no way all of those guys were hurting for money that bad. In between Anderson and Boll's barrage of crap, we'd get the occasional big budget effort, like the Angelina Jolie Tomb Raider films, the Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson Carl Urban starring Doom, or Marky Mark Wahlberg's Max Payne movie, but those films still suffered from the same narrative ills as their lower budget counterparts, namely nonsensical plots, inexplicable changes to the source material, as well as direct references to the source material without any real translation, resulting in heaping helpings of cheese and cheap novelties. For example, a first-person shooter scene in Doom is a fun gimmick, but it does little to make up for the previous couple hours of stupid bullshit. This wealth of crap seemingly cemented the video game movie genre as one that would thrive in Walmart DVD bargain bins for all eternity alongside Hallmark movies and Lifetime flicks, but in early 2019 when no one was looking, one electric rat and a really cool hat would change everything. No, I didn't mean for that to rhyme. I could of course only be referencing Detective Pikachu. While there had been a number of animated Pokemon films released over the years, I mean, of course there were. We're talking about a franchise that's generated over $150 billion since its inception in 1996. There had never been an attempt at a mainstream live-action movie. That all changed with Detective Pikachu. Unlike the plethora of previously mentioned video game films before it, Detective Pikachu set itself apart thanks to the involvement of the Pokemon Company, the monolithic corporation that manages every aspect of the brand. Rather than licensing the film to a random studio or a filmmaker, the Pokemon Company was involved in every aspect of the film's development, choosing and collaborating with the best studio for the job, approving scripts, character and creature designs, and generally setting the standards that they wanted to see. A double-edged sword when you consider that director Rob Letterman had to fight to keep the Mr. Mime scene, aka the best scene in the movie.
Okay, that's it. No, we're switching roles. I'm bad cop, you're good cop.
No, we're not cops. Oh God, that's a very hard one.
Thanks to that quality control, the result was a fun mystery adventure film that featured stunning character designs inspired by fan artist R.J. Palmer and executed by Toho, the Japanese company behind the legendary Godzilla franchise, notably the most recent Godzilla -1, which absolutely rips. The moderate success of Detective Pikachu marked a massive change for the video game film genre as a whole, setting a trend that nearly every video game adaptation has since followed, the inclusion of the creators behind the games. Sega is directly involved with the development of the aforementioned Sonic franchise, no doubt providing the pixel art for the very cool 16-bit end credit sequences. Nintendo, learning from the mistakes of their past, had a heavy hand in developing the recent Super Mario Bros. Movie, partnering with the minds behind the Minions, Illumination, to release a lazy, yet good enough animated film that still managed to exceed the low bar set by the original, grossing over $1 billion and generating yet another Jack Black jam that still occasionally gets stuck in my head. And even though Naughty Dog wasn't directly involved with the Uncharted film, its parent company, Sony, had a vested interest in making sure the film adaptation wasn't a complete trash fire, opting instead for a small hobo fire with two deeply miscast leads standing around it. Why is Nathan Drake hitting Spider-Man poses? It could be argued that video game adaptations have been faring even better on the small screen for many of the same reasons. In the past few years alone, there have been a number of animated video game translations that have made their way to streaming, all of which have been well received by general audiences and fans of the source material alike. Shows like Castlevania, Cyberpunk Edgerunners, and Arcane League of Legends. The Sonic franchise released a pretty fun spin-off miniseries that put the spotlight on Idris Elba's scene-stealing Echidna Knuckles, but most notably, we've also received two outstanding prestige television adaptations that have each gone on to garner several Emmy nominations: Prime Video's Fallout and HBO's adaptation of The Last of Us, both of which benefited from input by the creators of the games. In the case of Fallout, while he didn't have a direct hand in developing the series, longtime video game designer and director of Bethesda Studios Todd Howard had the wisdom to partner with producer-director Jonathan Nolan to make the best product possible. I mean, if you're going to make a TV show, it's not a bad idea to reach out to Christopher Nolan's little brother. Together, Howard, Nolan, and their collaborators constructed a darkly hilarious action drama that not only captured the spirit of the games, but created a narrative that could quite cleverly slot right into the world of the games themselves. On the flip side, The Last of Us Season 1 was a direct adaptation of the first game, with the game's creator Neil Druckmann serving as a writer and director for certain episodes. Though the series remained mostly faithful to the source material, it wasn't afraid to adapt when necessary, every change serving to heighten the narrative, subtly shifting the way the cordyceps virus works, putting a finer point on the relationships in the game, removing any ambiguity from the functional romantic partnership between Joel and Tess, and transforming Bill and Frank's implied homosexual relationship into a full-blown romance, and expanding the Henry and Sam subplot by adding the wrinkle of Sam's hearing disability, as well as putting a face and motivation to the Kansas City paramilitary forces in the form of Melanie Linsky's Kathleen. All of these changes enhance the narrative of the game, alleviating the one real concern I had for the series, whether or not it was even necessary. A concern that in itself illustrates how far the video game medium has come. While the creators behind early video game adaptations felt they had to drum up random concepts and settings in order to throw some meat on the bone of the anemic narratives of their source material, video games like The Last of Us rival films when it comes to storytelling, marrying the audio, visual, and performance of film with novelistic length and the added benefit of the immersion that comes with interactivity. Watching Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey evade a bloater is one thing, but having your own face ripped open by one is another. another. In many ways, the evolution of video game adaptations mirrors that of the comic book movie, each form giving us early adaptations that did everything in their power to downplay their inspirations and minimize the involvement of the creative minds behind them, only improving with the aid of the initial creators and as the mediums themselves grew more sophisticated through their seminal works. As we continue to see video game adaptations improve, I think it's safe to hypothesize that they'll eventually achieve the same cultural dominance as their comic book counterparts, generating a wealth of great material alongside the occasional Morbius or Madam Web level flub. Now if you'll excuse me, I have to get back to watching Borderlands.
This has to happen now. Don't judge me. Oh, big bullet coming on.
Let me know what you think about modern video game movies down in the comment section below. Like me, do you think they're vastly improved, or do you think they're still as shitty as ever? Let me know. I'd also like to ask that if you liked this video, please hit the like button, press subscribe, ring the bell, and share it with a friend. I'd like to say thanks in advance, thanks for watching, and until next time, peace.